Welcome, everyone. This is today's webinar being presented by Chris Wood, Urantia Association's president. About today's presenter. Chris Wood has been active in the Urantia community for 22 years now. He has served in various capacities for several conferences, boards, and committees, including 8 years as the president of the International Service Board for Urantia Association. Chris lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin, United States, with his wife and 2 growing boys, and works as an air traffic controller. He spends his spare time toiling in the beginning stages of coffee roasting, soap making, and woodworking. So thank you, Chris Wood, for joining us. We're looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you, everybody. I realize that there is an update to my resume now. I've kind of gone off of soap and I've gone into deodorant lately. I have a great deodorant recipe, but that's a whole other conversation. I sometimes like to give people little jars of my deodorant. It has my face on it. Just like, if you want to smell like Chris Wood, use this. Sometimes it works. I am going to be sharing my screen from time to time and then stopping to share the screen. So I'm going to start by sharing it. And here we go. Hopefully you see the banner relatively now. So here's an outline of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to tell a couple stories about faith and hope and the testings of faith and hope. And then we're all going to talk for a bit. We're going to talk a little bit about service being transformed, and then we're going to talk for a bit. And then I'm going to share some thoughts. I've been asked to share a few thoughts on 8 years of service as Urantia Association's president. If I have any accumulating ideas for that, I don't know if I really do, but I'll share what I'm thinking about today about it. And we can talk a bit about that. And then finally, at the end, we're going to do a preview. My wife, Alice, is going to come and join us. And so as you hopefully all know, there is a big conference coming up in April being hosted by the Peru Association. It should have been our live in-person international conference in Peru. Because of a global pandemic, we've gone online. But my wife and I will be doing a workshop at this conference together. And so we will give the first 5 or 10 minutes or so of that workshop so you can see what we'll be doing, and hopefully you'll want to attend and join us in our workshop in Peru. So that's where we're going to be going. So we're going to start with some talks about faith and hope. This picture is one of my favorite pictures of Jesus. It comes from this series done by Wang Suda, I believe is his name. He's an artist, obviously from China, from some Chinese missionaries who went to China, and these artists were commissioned to do this work. And these posters, there's a series of them. They hang up actually in Techni Towers in Chicago on the 3rd floor. And so every time I'm there, I like to just hang out there on the 3rd floor for a few minutes and just look at these wonderful posters they have. So there's this great quote in the middle of the Supreme Papers, and it says, "Man's urge for paradise perfection, his striving for God attainment, creates a genuine divinity tension in the living cosmos, which can only be resolved by the evolution of an immortal soul." And I love that idea of divinity tension. And that's what I'm always trying to explore, is this divinity tension that's happening within myself. Where is this new tension? Because it's always different, right? I mean, as we're growing and as we're changing, and there's always a new form of tension that's coming out. And so every time I do a webinar or workshop or anything at all, I try to figure out what am I thinking about? What's my divine tension that's going on right now? And then try to explore that. And so that's what we're going to be exploring today, is just where's my tension at right now? And we can all share thoughts. Great quote from the Bible. It says, "From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked." Jesus says this in the Urantia book too, but I've always liked the wording here from this version of Luke. And it's something that I've always taken very seriously, and it's always kind of worried me, and it's given me some tension, because there's no denying that I have been given much. I mean, just start with the idea that I've been born in the United States and I'm a white male. And then add in, that I was given good access to education. Add in that growing up, I had literally dozens of Urantia books laying around my house. And so I've started clearly, I mean, if we want to use baseball as a metaphor, I've clearly started on third base. And so I've always then thought so much more than from me is being demanded. And I don't know if I'm ever living up to those more, demands. And how can I know if I'm living up to those demands? I've always worried that, we're going to go and meet Jesus, and Jesus will be the one pointing at me and saying, "You are an indolent and slothful steward." It's one of my favorite quotes from the Urantia book. You can find it on that page. It actually comes from the middle of a parable, but still, I just like the idea of Jesus pointing at someone and accusing them of that, because that's how I often feel, Jesus might judge me that way, or at least I'm a little bit afraid of that. So I try to be active and I try to be good. And we know this quote from the Urantia book that mortal man earns his status as an ascending candidate by his own faith and hope. And so that's where we're starting from, is how do we just get in the door of the kingdom of heaven? And that's how we earn it right there, is through our own faith and hope. And then the right to enter the kingdom is conditioned on faith, personal belief, but the cost of remaining and the progressive ascent of the kingdom is the pearl of great price, in order to possess which a man sells all that he has. So I think this is where we can stop the share and I can talk about some stories. So I've always thought that, okay, I'm in the door. Now I'm in the door, and what can I do to help continue forward with the service? And recently, what I've been thinking about, where this divine tension has been coming from recently, is the notion that actually just that foot in the door can suddenly be revoked and the door can be slammed shut because our faith gets tested and we fail those tests. Jesus has some good stories about this. The parable of the talents is one. The story of the prodigal son is another. I've always related to the second son and the prodigal son, the one who stayed behind and was just the good boy working. And then he's just like, "Where's my party?" at the end, right? So those stories are great, and Jesus tells those stories, and he's wonderful. I'm going to tell two different stories just so that we're not using up all the time with Chris telling stories that we've all read before. So you can be tested in your faith in easy ways, and you can be tested in your faith in hard ways. And by easy and hard, I mean, even the easy ways are going to appear hard to you because you are being tested. But I think maybe from the grander, universal view, from the top view down, the easy ways are the material ways. And Jesus said to the God-knowing believer, "What does it matter if all things earthly crash?" The midwayers tell us that temporal securities are vulnerable, but spiritual sureties are impregnable. When the flood tides of human adversity, selfishness, cruelty, hate, malice, and jealousy beat upon the mortal soul, you may rest in the assurance that there is one inner bastion, the citadel of the spirit, which is absolutely unassailable. Spirit-born individuals are so remotivated in life that they can calmly stand by while their fondest ambitions perish and their keenest hopes crash. They positively know that such catastrophes are but the redirected cataclysms which wreck one's temporal creations, primarily for the rearing of a more noble and endearing realities of a new and more sublime level of universe attainment. What does it matter if all things earthly crash? So the first story is the story of Matadoris. It's one of my favorite stories from the Urantia book. So the Urantia book tells us, and the Bible tells us this story, the same story too. So I like to tell this story to Christian churches, of a rich man who goes up to Jesus and asks, "I would like to know what I must do to gain eternal life." And Jesus answers the rich man, "You must confess that you're a sinner and accept me into your heart as your personal Lord and Savior." Except we know Jesus doesn't say that. If Jesus was ever going to say that, this would be the place in the Bible where he would say it, because he's being asked the direct question, what must I do in order to gain eternal life? And here's how Jesus answers. He tells him to keep the commandments. Which ones? Asked the man, because of course there are about 160 odd laws of Israel. They often contradicted one another. Jesus focused on the 10 commandments, not even the full 10. He skips the first 4. The first 4 are about God and how you treat God. Apparently, God doesn't get all bent out of shape if you don't treat him properly. Jesus focuses on the last commandments. He tells the rich man, don't steal, don't lie, don't kill, don't be unfaithful to others, and to honor your parents. In the Urantia book, Jesus adds, do not defraud. In the Bible, Jesus adds, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, each of these thou shalt not commandments is also reciprocal. You don't want to be lied to or stolen from or killed, so you don't do it to others. So the rich man says, I already follow all of those rules. And this is where Jesus pulls out the 10th commandment. Don't be jealous of your neighbor's stuff, which of course, the reciprocal, equally true, means don't try to make your neighbors jealous of your stuff. Jesus tells the rich man that if he wants to become one of his 70 messengers, he'll have to sell all of his belongings and give away his fortune. And the rich man walks away dejected because he had some really nice stuff. The Urantia book tells us this man's name, Matadoris. How strange it must be to make the Urantia book as an example of what not to do. There's others whose story, they make the book, but they're not named. There's even another rich man who Jesus counsels in Rome, and he's merely referred to as a rich man. But Matadoris gets named. The authors of the Urantia book want us to remember Matadoris, the man who walked away from Jesus because he loved his house too much, or his cart, or his fine jewels and fine dishware. Now in the Bible, this is where the rich man's stories end, but in the Urantia book, we're told of Matadoris's redemption. Later on in life, he does sell all of his possessions and becomes a leader of a church in Jerusalem where Jesus's brother James was in charge. So if we're going to, talk about, people can be redeemed later on in life, but he's still his faith was tested in that one moment and he failed and he walked away. And how easy is it for us then to have our faith tested in seemingly easy material ways and to fail? When you make yourself available to, All right, so our faith can be tested in hard ways and our faith can be tested in easy ways. The easy way is the Matadoris way, this material way. I want to talk about the hardest way I've seen faith tested in the Urantia book. All right. One of my favorite jobs in the Ascension career is the planetary prince's staff. So as you all know, when a planetary prince embarks upon a world of service, he usually takes with him a staff of ascending sons and daughters to assist him in the first dispensation of his work. 100 formal mortals of the realm who have lived and died and experienced the reawakening on the mansion worlds. They've mastered all 7 mansion worlds and they've obtained citizenship on Jerusalem. These Urantial beings are chosen from those who have not fused yet with their adjuster. Now, we all know that fusion with the adjuster is obtainable even on this world. So these volunteers are not necessarily all that much further spiritually developed than where we are currently. It says that these ascending sons can often fuse around Mansion World 5, which is the equivalent of the first stage of light and life on an evolving world. But these people make it all the way through Mansion World 5 and Mansion World 6 and Mansion World 7, all the way to Jerusalem, and they haven't fused yet. And so these ascending sons and daughters volunteer to take leave of their thought adjusters, to go to a primitive world to help establish civilization. Now remember, The prince is invisible to the mortal eye, so the staff is the link between the prince and the mortals. Or if you were to think about it, they're the link between the mortals and their first concept of deity, this invisible prince. The average length of service for these 100 volunteers is, we're told, 500,000 years. An apostle of Jesus once asked him, "Master, what should I do if a stranger forces me to carry a pack for a mile?" And Jesus responded in part, "If you can think of nothing more effectively positive to do, you can at least carry that pack for a second mile." The prince's staff carries this pack for 500,000 years because service is its own reward, we're told, because there's a job to be done, and it requires a pre-fusion ascender, because those people are available and because you have all eternity, literally an eternity of service ahead of you. So why not start with 500,000 years helping a world from scratch? Now, each prince's staff can be assumed has more volunteers than there are positions available. So they get interviewed for the job, if you will. They get to know the secondary Ladandeks, who will be the princes and the prince's chief of staff. They get interviewed all the way up through the chief executive officer of the local system, and then they even get interviewed by the system sovereign himself. It is not an easy job to get. Those who are chosen have to take leave of their thought adjusters, because thought adjusters do not work descending missions. They only work ascending missions. So the adjusters go and take a break. So let's say you've lived your mortal life of about 100 years, and then you spend about 100 years on each mansion world, and then a couple hundred years on Jerusalem, just kind of getting to know the place. So you've been around for about 1,000 years, and your overall goal for this introductory period of the universe is to get to know your adjuster and to fuse with it. But now you're going to be trusted to take leave of the adjuster and work for the good of the universe by yourself for 500,000 years. Now, did you have mortal children, and have you kept track of them through the mansion worlds? They're going to be 500,000 years down the ascension path. Friends and family, 500,000 years gone. But we don't worry, because they're going to have their own side projects to do along the way as well. Tonya Baney is a Urantia book reader, and she's an accomplished artist. She's a painter. And for several years, she left her home in Chicago to brave she left her home in Hawaii to go to Chicago to brave the winters and serve as the executive director at Urantia Foundation. I once asked her while she was doing this if she missed painting. Yes, of course, she said, but it would be okay. She said she planned to take several thousand years off at some point to really explore the art. So citizens of the universe have a different concept of time. All right, so if you're lucky enough to make it to Jerusalem and you've not yet fused with your adjuster, then they have a job for you to do if you're willing. And it's an amazing commitment. So here's where we should talk about Van. He was one of the prince's staff for our world, oh so many years ago. One day, after about 300,000 years into the assignment, just as things were starting to get good, Dalagastia, the chief of staff, called a meeting. "Hey," he says, "I've got an exciting announcement. Prince Caligastia was about to proclaim himself the absolute sovereign of Urantia and demands that all administrative groups resign their functions and hand their power over to Dalagastia as a trustee, pending the reorganization of the planetary government. Good news," he says. "There is no God, and Caligastia is in charge now." So Van is the chairman of the Supreme Council of Coordination. This council is like the Supreme Court with their functions. They're entrusted with everything that wasn't assigned to any other groups. The members of this council had to be approved not just through the local system and the system sovereign, but they had to actually be approved all the way up to the constellation fathers of Adintia. So Van gets up, and we're told that he makes a masterly appeal. He says, "Look, what we're talking about might be viewed as, planetary rebellion. So before we make any rash decisions, let's talk things over with the system sovereign." And everyone said, yes, very good plan, Van. You're always the voice of reason. So they call up the system sovereign, or I don't know if they call them, they shoot off an email, something like that. They get a hold of the system sovereign and ask what's going on. And the system sovereign responds, giving an order designating Caligastia as the supreme sovereign of Urantia and commanding absolute and unquestioning allegiance to his mandates. And it was in reply to this amazing message that we're told, the noble Van made a memorable address of 7 hours in length. This was before television, when people had better attention spans. 7 hours in which he formally drew up indictments of Dalagastia, Caligastia, and the system sovereign himself as standing in contempt of the sovereignty of the universe of Nebadon. We're told he also shot off a quick email to the Most Highs of Adentia, who, again, he happened to know because they had to interview him, to try to get some support. But the system circuits had been severed, Urantia was isolated, and every group of celestial life found itself suddenly and without warning, utterly cut off from outside counsel and advice. Dalagastia formally proclaimed Caligastia god of Urantia and supreme over all. And with this proclamation before them, each group drew off by itself and began deliberations, discussions that would determine the fate of every superhuman personality on the planet. For all his efforts, Van led 40 of the 100 clear of rebellion. And with this, Urantia's ambitions were crushed. But hey, what does it matter if all things earthly crash? The last paragraph of the paper of the Universe Mother Spirit, it says, in every dark hour, at every crossroad in this forward struggle, the Spirit of Truth will always speak, saying, this is the way. So do you want your faith tested in the easy ways, like Matadoris, or in the hard ways, like the Prince's 100 staff? One way to think about this is 60 of the most qualified people in the entire system had their faith tested in a hard way, and they failed. And so I'm led to believe that our hope and our faith is not just this one thing that we have. It's something that we need to renew. It is not just I'm in the door now. It is, you have to stay in the door. You have to keep your foot jamming that door open. You have to consistently work at it because your faith will be tested in easy ways and in hard ways. And I kind of want to see my faith tested in a hard way once, like, Van and the 100, just to see what I would do. And I really hope my faith will hold up. So those are my 2 stories about hope and about faith. Now's a good time for discussion. So I don't have everyone on screen. I'm hoping some other people do, but raise your digital hands and you will be called on if you have something to say. What do you think about faith and what do you think about hope? Or, about anything in general. I'm really open here. I see Susan and Jeff.
Actually, it's just Jeff.
Ah.
But I would go back to the if we're going to be tested, who's marking the test? Is it our geometric arithmetic difference, between our ideals and our abilities? Is it the Ancients of Days in terms of, well, we don't want that one to go any farther? Is it, our rate of ascension versus our possible rate of ascension? And that sort of begs the question of how far up the chain do we ask who is judging? Because judgment implies a judgmental God, a kind of a God of the Old Testament. You're not up there yet, so a few more penance and a few more Hail Marys and perhaps some indulgences, and maybe we can think about it again. Versus a loving God of the New Testament, where no matter what you do, you're faintest flicker of faith, you're still in. So the real question is, who's marking the test? And if it is truly testing of faith, what is your faith in? What is your trust in? Anyway, my thoughts.
I have something too. Jeff didn't know I had my hand up too, and that's okay.
Sorry.
Chris, I would just say, first of all, I love your style of presentation. Thank you. And if you have been serving as president of UAI, as father of 2 growing boys, and living in central Wisconsin and holding down a job, and feel like you haven't been tested in a big way, I bow deeply, because you to me have been one of those people who has had a wonderful life of service. And so I see that as a big test, and you're passing with good marks. I also, this is a little off topic and forgive me, but I don't know if we can refuse to fuse. I've wondered about this, that we are eligible for fusion, and did these 100 perhaps take a bye? And I don't know if it's possible. So I'm just putting that out, not to distract into that. I know it's not about faith and hope, but I have contemplated that, not because I've had to figure it out for myself, but just wondered if you are able to fuse, if you automatically do, or if you do get to voice your feeling about that. So anyway, not to sideline, but that's a piece. And I just, then to stay on topic, many in our circles, in our local study groups, and in our Zoom around the world study groups have voiced many times, well, when we get to Mansonia, it's going to be easier. And you have in your storytelling and in your sharing personally reflected back our feeling as well, that it's not going to get easier. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. I don't know how other people feel about it. I mean, I know that they say at one point that on an advanced light and life world, as people are getting ready to fuse, they do have a few days or a certain amount of time where they get to just kind of prepare and say, you know, goodbye to everyone. Everyone gets to gather around. So I don't know if that could be extended. I often think about it like my second, I mean, maybe I'll say both kids. My first kid, you know, he's what, 3-4 years old, and he starts losing teeth, you know, and that's just a thing that happens. My second kid, I think he was 6 or 7 before he lost his first tooth. And boy, did he just feel bad about it. He wanted to lose teeth like all the kids in his class were losing teeth. And his older brother had lost all these teeth. And, you know, he just wanted to be a part of that gang. I wonder if it's somewhat like that. And just that, here you are, you're in Mansion World 5. Well, I still haven't fused yet, but that's okay. And then 6 passes and then 7 passes. And you think that you are just doing something wrong, when really you're just in this class of people where you get to do this amazing adventure, you know, or at least you're qualified to do it if you're willing to. But I could be wrong about thinking it like that too. I'm like, as you know, I'm a parent of 2 boys, so all of my analogies at this point are all about parenting. It's just about smashing a bucket of red paint together with a bucket of yellow paint and see what color we just made the carpet. So anyway, yes, Luis, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Chris. I don't know if anybody else might have, you know, raised their hand, not electronically before me, but if I am jumping anyone, I apologize. So great to see so many great friends and good and old faces, new faces as well. Thank you, Chris, for the presentation. So far, it's been a great introduction into this topic, because in a way, I think it's a theme that really resonates with a lot of us because of the pandemic. One of the things that sometimes I try to share with others in study groups or conversations is that somehow the Urantia book is a great tool to help us strengthen our faith and rebuild our hope. And that the older we get, the more certain we become, and this is following up a little bit Susan's point, the more certain we become that the challenges will just continue to get bigger. And actually, we are given the tools and the experience and the possibility to use that revelation and the experience of living with each other and in relation with our spiritual helpers to try to strengthen those convictions, those ideals, those hopes for the future. So what you shared with us in a way with the story of the rich man, first of all, I find very relevant, not only in the literal sense, in the sense of letting go of a lot of our material possessions, but some of our mental attachments and our expectations with what we believe should be or should not be, and that sometimes that is actually informing the way we behave, what we accept as livable or not, and how we reject some things or how reactive we become to others, particularly when we have been under lockdown and with new rules thrown at us and new variants of the virus and all of this and all of that. And I would say that you bringing this topic for conversation today just helps me start reflecting more about the value of those elements that the book gives us to continue to maintain poise, trust, confidence, and that living faith that you talk a little bit about, that this will also pass, and probably sooner than later, and use those spiritual fruits to continue the journey forward. That's what I wanted to share.
Yes, Dr. Perry. And you are muted, sir.
Hi, Chris. Some thoughts on faith. You made a very subtle point that really kind of exploded in my soul. And that is that when you talked about, the Bible talks about the faith being the gift of God. And what you've told us so far, that there is a separation between the faith that the thought of justice actually gives us and the thought of justice itself. That's the dichotomy there, so that those 500 were able to leave Jerusalem, not with the thought of justice, but with the faith that the thought of justice had left with them. And now that we've been given this gift of faith, now we have to grow it and use it and prove it. And so that I think that in our mortal life, if we look at the life of Jesus, who lived an ordinary mortal life, his faith was tested as far as it can be determined in an absolute way. So my thoughts on faith being tested is that it's in our everyday life that faith is tested. And I think that as we go through this mortal life, we're bound to be confronted with certain adverse situations. And I think this testing of faith has to do with the fact that being material beings, we always have a tendency to want to protect the material self, protect our material self. And so, but what happens is that as we, at least in my experience, what happens is that as we progress down this road, we get confronted with some moral decisions that may be contradictory to our material status. And so the test of faith is to believe the dominance of truth. That is, that truth will prevail in the end. So that we are always asked to say, are you going to choose the right decision, the highest decision, or decision with the highest value? Or are you going to revert back to protecting the material self? As you pointed out, what does it gain a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul? So this is another way of saying that. So I think that the guarantee of faith, as you pointed out, is you have to have this inexpressible hope within your soul that's actually pulling you forward to embrace the truth which you have gleaned in your soul, but you don't have the kind of mind yet that can really determine the absolute boundaries of it. But what happens is that as you choose God's will over your will, then you pass the faith test. But if you choose your will, then you have failed the faith test. As Jesus said, that it only requires faith to enter the kingdom of heaven. But once in there, this faith has to grow to an adult status so that it becomes more than just childlike, and the only way I can tell material example would be, say, for example, a bodybuilder, for example, who wants to build his body up. Well, we know the only way that's going to happen if he does those muscles and those exercise and keep pushing and pushing until they go and develop. I think faith, in a very similar ways like that, is that the harder the test become, the greater the faith becomes, and the greater the faith becomes, the greater your status, your spiritual status, or moral status increases. So I think I like the way that you put that the dichotomy between the gift of faith and the thought of justice itself, because as you pointed out, if the faith was the embodiment of the thought of justice, then when they left Jerusalem, they also left the faith as well. So I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Well, lest we get too far behind, I think I'll go on to my second point, if that's okay with you, everyone. So we've discussed a little bit faith and hope. I want to talk about service for a little bit, because, you know, I'm trying to think of the right analogy and I don't quite have it. I mean, I sometimes think of it like, I mean, I live in a snowy area, so sledding down a hill, you know, the faith and hope is getting on the sled. The service is staying on the sled, right? I mean, that sled's going along without you, whether or not you stay on it or not. And you might sometimes think now would be a good time to get off. It's never a good time to get off that sled. And so that's one way of thinking about it. I'm not quite sure. You might have some better ones, but I want to talk about service, and not so much to say, by the way, there's a wonderful webinar a couple weeks ago that the foundation hosted talking about service. And so I don't want to come out and say that, you know, there's one good service project out there for the world. You know, we all need to be focused on this one or that one or that one. I don't want to say that I don't want to talk about specific service projects. I'll bring up some examples, but about how we think about service, how we think about how we choose to spend our time. So I will share the screen one more time, and hopefully you're now seeing a nice picture of this nice man. Let's see if I can see it too. All right, so Jesus put a lot of work into getting people into the kingdom of heaven and getting individuals to accept his message that God is our Father and we are all brothers and sisters, right? Once we get through the gates, we have more work to do. I like to maybe think of another analogy is that we are the donkey, and Jesus is motivating us forward by holding a stick with a carrot on the end, dangling from a string, and then we kind of trudge along after it. And so some people might look at this and say, well, when's Jesus going to give that donkey that carrot, right? The true question is, when is the donkey, when are we going to realize that the kingdom of heaven is in that space between the tip of our nose and the tip of that carrot? When will we become self-motivated toward right action? Because just being in the gates isn't enough. So this is Rob Bell. He's an evangelical preacher here in the United States. He's the author of several books. I like him a lot. He opens the preface of his book, Love Wins, with the following quote. I believe that Jesus' story is first and foremost about the love of God for every single one of us. It's a stunning, beautiful, expansive love, and it's for everyone, everywhere. That's the story. For God so loved the world. That's why Jesus came. That is his message. That's where the life is found. But there's a growing number of us who've become acutely aware that Jesus' story has been hijacked by a number of other stories Jesus isn't interested in telling, because they have nothing to do with why or with what he came to do. The plot has been lost, and it's time to reclaim it. He always has these great quotes that just make me think, he needs to have the Urantia book, or he has the Urantia book, but truth is he doesn't. He's doing fine on his own, whether he's got the Urantia book or not, right? All right. I don't think I need to share the screen anymore. You've seen the quote. Stop share. So Rob Bell, he uses different words. He comes from a different spiritual vocabulary. But what he is suggesting at one point in his book, Love Wins, is this. We know that our world is one day destined for light and life. This is our social destiny, right? So what can we do to help? How can we think about service? We can identify what society will be like in that age and then work to make our current world like that. We can drag the future into our present. So what will life and life be like? Well, we're told that there will be one world government that exerts increasingly less control over the population. I'm not sure if anyone in this Zoom room is able to make that happen. We're told that we'll have control over the weather and the environment. Great strides are being made today in this area, what with necessity being the mother of invention. If any of you are currently working on this, keep it up because it's beyond my ability to help. I need something a little bit smaller. And so what Rob Bell suggests, and this is his way of thinking about it, is that right now in the world today, around 1 billion people, give or take, do not have access to clean water. And we know that in Light and Life, all people will have access to clean water. And so if we work to give access to clean water to everyone around, then we're working to bring light and life into today's world. We can drag that future into our present. A solitary messenger tells us that our adjusters are pleading with us to lead our material lives in the light of our spiritual and future career. So this is one way of thinking about it, but there are other great ways to think about this global service. And we know about the Free Schools Project and teaching people to read, because we know that in Light and Life, everyone will have access to education. And so that's another great way to think about these grand service projects. But we don't always have time for a grand service project, right? We don't always have 6 months or a year to go and dedicate to making great big changes in the world. But there are things that the Urantia book says that we can do even in our short amount of time. So one quote from the Urantia book is that brotherhood is impossible on a world whose inhabitants are so primitive that they fail to recognize the folly of unmitigated selfishness. There must occur an exchange of national and racial literature. Each race must become familiar with the thoughts of all races. Each nation must know the feelings of all nations. Ignorance breeds suspicion, and suspicion is incompatible with the essential attitude of sympathy and love. So if you have an hour, one thing you can do is sit down and read a book from an author from another country. And so one of the things I've tried to do over the last years is anytime I go to another country, I try to, in the months leading up to it, pick up a book from an author from that country and just read it. Just get a sense of, that way of thinking. This quote talks about books. I'm convinced that this can be expanded in today's culture into music and into television or into any of these ways that we have of expressing ourselves through art, right? And so learning about these other cultures and the way that they think is one way that we can spend an hour that actually is in service to the world to help bring about this harmony and sympathy and love that's out there. Another thing that the Urantia book tells us is there must be a multiplication of multilinguists. And that's another thing we can all do. And what many people, I think, have been doing during our times of COVID is they've been spending their time studying another language, which is great because we can't learn to love another. I mean, we can. It's much easier to learn to love another person if you can actually speak with them and communicate with them. And so all of these things are available to us if you just have an extra hour of the day and you're thinking, what can I do for this hour to be of some small service to the world? You can learn to communicate with another person through language. You can learn to appreciate another person's culture through a sharing of art, of books and music and television and anything else that you have that helps you bring that art into your world. I think that's good enough to think about service and how I think about service. And so now's the time again to open this up for a conversation and talk about how you think about service and how we can you know, what can, not just what can we do if we have 6 months or a year, but what can we do if we have an afternoon to be of service for the world or for anything at all. So let me try to find my list of participants again. If you have a digital hand, raise it. If not, start waving and hopefully someone will notice. Oh, I see Kay Cooper.
What you see is Bill Cooper.
Oh, hi, Bill Cooper.
Hi, Chris. I think the best way we can be of service is to live our lives lovingly with regard to everything that's going on around us. That we can have regard for every other person in the sense that we want their welfare. We don't want to take advantage. We want not to be selfish and self-centered in what we do. That way, if you will lead your life that way 100% of the time, you will be serving constantly because you'll meet situations of need where the other person needs to be served and you'll fill that need. And then you'll move on. Jesus did a great deal of that in his life. Most of what he did by way of service was circumstances that he happened across. And it isn't like you see an opportunity once or twice in a lifetime. If you'll get out and contact people, you'll find that there are opportunities to be helpful to them that multiply by the hour. It's not a matter when you're serving as you pass by of just occasionally having an opportunity and doing something. It is an occasion of constantly having opportunities to take the other person's welfare into consideration when you act. And I think that's the most important way. It'll lead you to do things that are bigger, more outstanding, more service project oriented. But in the spaces between your actions in those big events, you'll be serving in small ways that are extremely important to individuals. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. Bye.
Thank you. Antoinette.
Oh, sorry. I'm like, it's so crazy. I'm trying to like multitask and do everything at the same time. But thank you so much for having me here and seeing my wonderful brothers and sisters here on this conversation. And the reason why I joined and seeing what the things that you guys were talking about, love, faith, and service, and which is so important on the works that we're trying to do, is that it can be done in many ways. You know, like the Urantia book says, it's like you can do God's will in many earthly occupations at the same time. And just recently, I only joined the platform called Clubhouse. I do a lot of work on social media, so I've always been trying to always be there on the ground floor when it developed from like MySpace to Facebook to Instagram to Twitter to I didn't never really gotten the Snapchat, but TikTok is blowing up, and also now the new one is called Clubhouse. And it's kind of crazy because as I searched the word Urantia, there was nobody that was saying or anything. Somebody from our study groups, I noticed there's some people here who are actually in our weekly study groups that we do on Wednesdays and we do on Sundays. But there's this platform, which is a whole nother network of a whole nother group of people where we're not preaching to the choir. It's kind of like, it's kind of like, if you're talking about a certain idea or subject on spirituality, that there's so many awesome people who are just like willing to learn and willing to understand and willing to grasp new knowledge. And I've only been on there just a few days, but I was just realizing and understanding that there's so many people that you can actually touch and reach, because we know we've been in this business for a very long time, as far as like how we introduce the Urantia book to the communities in different countries and different places within our own families. And it's hard, especially if you're trying to go after like the churches and the Christian community. But I'm saying there's a whole new world out there who are people who are looking for spirituality, that are atheists and who are agnostics and who are the lost sheep of people. And these people, this loving service, I feel like, we don't need to be hiding as Urantia book readers. We're not being thrown to the lions. We might get thrown to the lions, as far as cancel culture on social media, but we're not being thrown to the lions for like sharing good news and great news and revelation and all these different things. So anybody who wants to connect with me, because I do a lot of social media work and everything, if you want to sit there and participate in these discussions, I will happy to host these rooms, to host these conversations, to sit there and just like explore with people who are like interested in learning more and understanding that, religion doesn't have to be such a negative thing, but spirituality is so welcome amongst the populace and growing humanity and different things. So there's a lot of different new audiences that we can reach out to that is different from us preaching to the choir within our monk selves, so I invite anyone, just contact me. Everybody knows how to get in touch with me and stuff, but I love you all. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Antoinette. Don.
Yeah. At the Last Supper, Jesus gave us the example of the remembrance meal. But he also gave us the example of selfless service in washing the apostles' feet. And it seems like that must have been really important for him to leave us that example, since he did it on the last opportunity that he had. When we go to paradise, the task at hand is to find the three members of existential deity. And we seek out, find, and embrace the Spirit first, then the Son, and finally the Father. And service is an action. And action seems to be the watchword for the Spirit, the conjoint actor. And when you were talking before about the candidates for the Prince's staff and how they had not fused prior to arriving on Jerusalem, and certainly volunteering to be a member of the Prince's staff is truly an act of service. So perhaps the reason that they haven't fused is because they haven't really discovered the importance of service in the path to finding the Father.
Thank you, Don.
Chris, may I share? I don't know where my my hand is, so I can't raise it.
Yes, Sherry.
Gosh, this is a great prompt. So I thank you for it. And I'm just sitting here just remembering how hard I struggled understanding what service meant to me as a new reader some 30-something years ago. At that point, I was a single parent, and I was raising a child on my own and holding down a full-time job in a new city. And I knew I didn't have the bandwidth to volunteer. My sole assignment at that time was raising my daughter. And little did I not understand then, as I understand now, was that by raising my daughter, I was doing service, right? We're taught that service is love applied. Love applied. And there's a saying in the book, and I hope somebody can find it for me, but basically it says that we will get to a point, maybe during light in life, where being able to help someone will be our highest joy on any given day. I don't remember where that quote was, but I remember reading it. And what I've discovered is, as I continue along this journey, service looks so varied and different on a daily basis. Yesterday, I had to call a list of people, some donors, to thank them for some donations they had made. And I began speaking with a young man of 86 who lives alone, has no family, and he had made a generous donation. And we began to chat about the book and how the teachings had changed his perspective on life. And he said that he read something to me that really was beautiful. He said, the path I've chosen to follow is one God has prepared for all of us, that we may all glory in his presence. I've described this way to all in my family of blood kin, and also my family by adoption, by adopting one another as friends. And I know now that if no one chooses to journey with me, God has given me the strength of faith that if I must, I will make the journey alone, with only him as my faithful friend and guide. And boy, did that bless me. And boy, did he continue to bless me as we chatted, and we agreed to become phone pals at the end of our discussion. And I wanted to be phone pals with him because he had such a joy and a clarity of thinking and being that was so attractive to me. And yet he's all alone. And so I wanted to do something for him. And I said, maybe I can call you sometime. He said, I would love that. And when we concluded the conversation, he said, Sherry, you have made my day. And I said, no, you don't understand. You've made mine. Now, 30 years ago, I would not have understood that, what that was, what actually had happened. But I think that's what I'm beginning to understand, is that service is anytime anyone can bring loving light, good news, and joy to another, whether it's encouraging, inspiring, supporting, listening, laughing, smiling, helping. I mean, service looks like so many different things. And so for anyone who used to think the way I thought, that I'm not being of service because I can't leave my home and do X, Y, and Z, I hope that they will also learn what I have learned, that that is not the truth. That as we do go about our day, as we really come to reflect on how we relate to one another, our children, our spouses, we're being of service to our children, our spouses, our neighbors, our colleagues, our bosses, the person at the grocery store who we thank for working during a holiday, or thank for being on the front line during COVID. We can serve literally as we live our day every day. And so I think we are challenged with understanding that the Father stands ready to reveal himself at any moment, as long as we allow him to flow through us. And that is love applied. And I love the beauty of that technique. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Sherry. Luis.
I don't want to overspeak, so if there's anybody else who would like to say something, I can also give my time, but thank you, Chris. Well, what Sherry just shared resonates a lot with me at this stage of spiritual progress that we're at in the planet, because for me, one of the greatest forms of service, well, first of all, I agree with, for me, the definition of love is service given to somebody. And sometimes we tend to focus our attention on the outside. And I think the focus of worship first starts in the internal. And once we make of the experience of worship a practice, we will a practice of worship. The outcome of worship will be the unequivocal desire to be of service, of unselfish, loving service. And what I find is that for many of us, if not for most of us, the best way to extend an act of love, an act of service to someone is forgiveness. And so many of us have so many relationships in our families, around us, in our jobs, that are conflicted or have had crises. We are distant, separated, or not in the best possible terms with somebody. And sometimes just simply extending the act of mercy, that mercy ministry to others through forgiveness is a great start to start understanding what it means really to be of service to somebody else. And sometimes that also involves self-forgiveness for some of our misdeeds or some of our mischief, or when we felt perhaps being a little bit too hard on ourselves, that we didn't meet the mark or whatever. I think inspiring ourselves into being more humble and more open to growth without responding to that spiritual tension that you talked about, Chris, but without building expectations that are unhelpful or unhealthy. Going around exploring areas of forgiveness to others in recognition of the God that dwells within them is a great, good first step towards then opening ourselves to that receptivity that Sherry's talking about, that helps us then become more serviceful in the world. This is what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. I really love this topic, and I'm hesitant to move on from it, but I look at the time and I know how these things go, and so the next section is the part that I really want to just go very fast through. But let's just rip this Band-Aid off, because we're going to talk. I'm going to give some reflections on the last 8 years and what I've learned and what I think. And honestly, again, we talk about this divine tension. What's the divine tension I've taken out of the last 8 years? So I say this to people, and I've said it for many years. Why did I accept to become this nominee to be the association's president, international president, 8 years ago? And it's because I truly believe this. I truly believe that in our ascension career, at some point, probably pretty early on, each one of us is going to be tasked with an important project. And we are going to have people working under us, and there's going to be people dependent on us fulfilling this project and doing a good job. And we are going to fail. And we are going to fail publicly, and we are going to have everyone see our failure of our project. This is part of our growing process, is that we have to publicly fail and still wake up that next morning and be able to move forward, right? So since I truly believe that this is part of our ascension career, you might as well give it a try here on this world and just get that check mark out of the way. And so I figured worst case scenario, becoming the president of the association, is I'll publicly fail in front of all of my friends and family in this loving Urantia community, and then we'll move forward. So I don't think it's been a failure, and I don't want everyone to start chiming in about how you think I've done a great job and it hasn't been a failure. I know that we've had a wonderful success these last 8 years, but I do encourage everyone to take up a challenge like this and to put yourself forward, because worst case scenario is you publicly fail and you get to check that box in your ascension career. What I remember the most and really have taken out of the last 8 years are the personalities involved. There's a smart Urantia book reader who told me that, throughout our entire ascension career, we're going to be working together in groups, right? And so the key is to find a group of people who you work well with and do a project with them, and then maybe find a group of people who you don't work well with and try to do a project with them as well, right? We need to learn to work together in groups. And so I've been honored to be able to travel throughout the world and visit these Urantia communities. And that's what I'm finding is through every Urantia community, there's a group of people and they're working together on this project. And some of them work together naturally and some of them work together at loggerheads, but they're working together toward this greater goal. And it's so fun to watch and inspiring to see that this is happening in every community throughout the world, these people coming together and working together on a project. And it's been an absolute joy to know that, I mean, just for me personally, to go and meet all these people and just find these instant connections of people who we get to work with. And, you know, every member of the ISB for the last 8 years has just been, I mean, you know, I remember meeting Jeannie. I met Jeannie. Someone said, you should meet Jeannie, you will love her. And I sat down and met Jeannie and I absolutely loved her. And then I begged her to come and join the ISB immediately. I remember meeting Luis at a conference the same way. It was just, I met Luis and it's just like, Luis, I've heard about you for years. Hey, let's get together and do something. And me and Luis went down to Mexico and met Fernando. And, you know, there are too many to name, but indeed, I've gone around the world, just met these wonderful people who are working together or who are willing to work with me on a project. And it's just been absolutely amazing to see. And that's what I've taken out of the greater group project of this. I'm honestly not the best person to come out here and say what, you know, all this, because I'm still kind of in the middle of it and just coming out of it. You know, Kathy Jones isn't with us anymore, but she passed along to Gaetan. And I think it was only after she passed, you know, she passed the leadership off to Gaetan that she could really reflect upon what it means to be a good leader and how good of a leader Gaetan was. Gaetan then, as he passed it off to me, he's now able to look back and reflect. And so in a couple of years after Enrique's taken over, I'll be able to look back and reflect and say what a great job Enrique's doing, because I can now look back with some distance from it. But, and here's where the divine tension comes from. If you asked me to tell you the absolute truth about what has been happening these last 8 years and what I've thought about this project, here's the tension. There's this quote in the Urantia book where Jesus is talking to kid John Mark. And actually what he's telling John Mark is that how great of parents he has, because this little kid has been allowed to run off with this group of wandering band of outlaw heretics. And he criticizes John Mark's friend Amos because Amos's parents won't let him do that. But that's a whole other story. Here's what he says to John Mark. He says, your whole afterlife will be more happy and dependable because you spent the first 8 years in a normal and well-regulated home. And so a couple of weeks before I took office, after the time I was nominated and before I took office, my second son was born. And so this entire 8 years, when I should be dedicating to making sure that he is born into a normal and well-regulated home, I've been off doing this. And it's kind of been this tension of, am I doing the right thing? Am I dedicating the right thing? And so I've been able to think about these last 8 years in terms of, I've been doing this as long as it takes a kid to learn how to sit up, or how long it takes for them to grow teeth or to walk, how to learn how to run and to feed themselves, how long it takes for a kid to start school, or how long it takes a kid to learn how to ride a bicycle is how long I've been doing this. How long it takes for a kid to learn how to read, how long it takes for a kid to learn how to cut his own hair, how long it takes for a kid to learn how to swim and tell really good jokes. And then somewhere in there, in these last 8 years of trying to have a well-regulated and normal home, somewhere in there, he snagged himself a thought adjuster. And so that's really what I've been focused on these last 8 years is, making sure that I'm not dropping one service ball when I pick up another. I read that quote, by the way, last night to this 8-year-old, and he looked around and he said, quote, "You call this normal? You call this well-regulated?" So he's funny, and I like him. So anyway, that's what I've been thinking about these last 8 years. And if you really ask me what I've been up to the last 8 years, this is how I pass the time. I mark the time, is by his growth. So that's me sharing. Is there anything anyone else would like to say on the subject of the last 8 years? And I guess I don't have anything to add. Yes, James. Did you have a...
That was for you. That question was for you, Chris.
Oh, I thought you were going to answer it. I don't know if I have an answer to that, because I'm very much of the tadpole living as a tadpole type person. And I'm just trying to get through the day. I mean, look, this is every parent out there, right? You're just trying to get through that day and hoping that tomorrow will take care of itself. So I don't know. I think Alice might be able to answer this honestly better than I can, but I don't have a good answer.
Alice?
You caught me. People were private messaging me about how cute my kids are, and so I was responding to them. You'll have to repeat the question.
The question was, what is the relationship between the decision of the highest value and the divine plan for your life?
The relationship between the decision of the highest value and the divine
plan for your life.
Alice, I trust you to keep a divine plan for my life, so I figured you could answer this for me.
Well, I think I've got that filed away in a box, probably with the, important documents. Relationship between decisions of the highest value and the divine plan of your life. When I think about, the Urantia book says that thought adjusters have, like, from the beginning, a plan for how your life is going to go. And I guess I've always taken kind of a general view of understanding that. I don't think that they have any, I don't think that they really get into the nitty-gritty when they're talking about the divine plan that those thought adjusters have in place, but more of just a general trajectory. And so we make so many different kinds of decisions in our life that don't necessarily play into that divine plan, but somewhere along the way, if we're kind of going with the flow, if we're doing the things that seem like they're moving in our direction, that are coming easily, not necessarily coming easily, but that we aren't necessarily fighting against the tide, that those kinds of big decisions, even if those big decisions are difficult and intimidating, that those are the kinds of decisions that lead into that divine plan. Does that answer your question?
It was just a thought question. There's no real answer, no right answer to it. I was just wondering what the relationship was between the two.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, dear, and I agree with you 100%. Yes, Gaetan.
Oh. There might have been someone before me. I knew Bruce Jackson lived this in before. So, okay, I'll go ahead. So thanks for this presentation on service. looking back on my own life, and like you said before, when you look back on your service and you look at whoever took your place, like Enrique, you will be able to reflect on what he's doing. And I guess you're right. We all do this thing after being in service for so many years. Another thing that occurred to me in service, we always ask to serve in higher capacity because we have done smaller service before. We're never asked to go in high service before we have done many, many other kind of services. And also another thing that I have experienced and I've seen around, anytime there's a service opportunity arising in our life, there's always something happening to make us choose differently. There's always an objection to say yes. And there's always a good reason that come up that we could say yes. For you might have been your kids, your kid just being born. For me was something else, and something that really was hard to go through with the decision of serving. We could have a good, very good excuse, and nobody would have hold that against us. But after I reflect through the time I've been serving UAI, and one thing that came to mind, I think we can only do that after a few years to have a more objective view of what it did to us. And what I realized is that the number of years I've served in UAI, on my own perspective now, is a very small time in my life. And then when I realized this, I'm saying to myself, wow, if I didn't do that, if I didn't offer myself for service at that time, what would have been my life like now? And so I imagine all those people that, have passed opportunity passed by themselves and never taken one of those opportunities, how they must feel when they get really old. Because I'm that age, I can look back. And I'm very, very grateful for the service opportunity that I was given in my life, so that at the end of my life, I can say, well, at least I did that in this life. I did not sit around, play golf, or do all kinds of other things to please myself. And I think everyone that's involved in service, as we grow older, it's more gratifying to serve than to take, to give than to take. And I've also learned that if I don't serve, if I would not serve now, I wouldn't know what to do. My life would have no meaning. So service gives us really high value to the meaning of our life. And I just pray that everyone would really engage themselves in service, any kind of service. And then they would feel their life fulfilled, at least when they leave this world. So thank you for sharing your experience. And I guess you and Alice are two of the people, most beautiful people ever met as a couple. So keep doing a good job as a father, husband, and a service. You're doing great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to briefly say that the ideas of the Urantia book are kind of the intellectual part of it, but being around people like you and Gaetan and Alice and many others has been really what has gotten me involved to be of some service in whatever ways, across your path with the Urantia book. And without the role models, my lazy streak probably would have gotten a better part of me, and it still does. But anyways, I just wanted to appreciate the value of role models in my life, and there's many of them here. And that's it.
Thank you, Bruce. I think I'd like to move along. So thank you, everybody. We've got one more thing, which is a preview. And look, Alice is great. I think everyone should know that Alice is great and wonderful, and that a lot of the times that I've been doing this Urantia work is times that I should have been doing the dishes and I didn't. Instead, Alice did the dishes. And so we can't say enough about just how wonderful she is. And we're going to include in here this preview of a presentation we're going to be doing during the Peru conference that totally comes from how smart and ingenious and creative Alice is. And so we get to highlight how great she is here for the next few minutes. So I'm going to share my screen once again. In case you don't know, there is a great conference coming up. It'll be in April, online. And boy, I really hope I got those dates right. I think I was just going off of memory. Let's see here. Yes, the 24th and 25th. I did good. So we're going to do this workshop, and here's what it's based on. One of the reasons I loved the Urantia book, and I'm continuously rereading it, is because it usually utilizes words that I think I understand, but then in some random paragraph in some random paper, it will define a common word in an uncommon way. And suddenly I need to go back and reread the entire thing from the beginning with a new definition in mind. Or I'll be reading the book in a study group, and there'll be a paragraph that I think is interesting, and I'll dissect it in the way I always think I dissect things. But then someone else will approach it in a completely different way, and I'll realize that I've been reading the Urantia book wrong for 20 years. So one such paragraph comes from paper 12 of the Urantia book. And the quote says, "The love of the Father absolutely individualizes each personality as a unique child of the universal Father, a child without duplicate in infinity, a will creature irreplaceable in all eternity. The Father's love glorifies each child of God, illuminating each member of the celestial family, sharply silhouetting the unique nature of each personal being against the impersonal levels that lie outside the fraternal circuit of the Father of all. The love of God strikingly portrays the transcendent value of each will creature, unmistakably reveals the high value which the universal Father has placed upon each and every one of his children, from the highest creator personality of paradise status to the lowest personality of will dignity among the savage tribes of man and the dawn of a human species on some evolutionary world of time and space." Now, if I'm being honest, I will probably read that paragraph, think I understand its message, and then about the importance that the Father places on each of us, and then I will move along. Honestly, if I were reading this paper, I probably wouldn't pause at that paragraph. But if I were asked, I would dissect this paragraph and emphasize the key fragments and try to propose a thesis about this seemingly random paragraph. But then Alice, my dear, sweet Alice, who, by the way, can't even remember our anniversary or what year our son Leo was born in, she reads this paragraph and she sees a prayer that she sculpts and shares at a multi-religious celebration that we had here in Green Bay for a celebration of Martin Luther King. And so this is the poem that she wrote, and we'll ask her to share.
Can it be that I exist without duplicate in all of creation? Can it be that you made me a personality so intricate upon this world? Can it be that your love for me, for him, and for her so intimate makes me an individual, irreplaceable in all eternity? I look upon this world seeking self-importance, self-maintenance, and sometimes self-deception. I try to do right, but sometimes I find myself stepping over others, those who are my brothers and my sisters. But it can be that your love strikingly portrays the transcendent value of each will creature, bringing forth every valuable feature, glorifying within the family of God the part and the whole, each and every living soul. Help me remember. Help me to be a child of yours who can see as you see.
Don't you know it? I have been reading the Urantia book wrong for 20 years. The Urantia book, it turns out, is a collection of 10,000 prayers strung together, one after the other, waiting for us to sculpt them and share them with the world. And so that's what our workshop at the Peru conference will be. We will be taking paragraphs from the Urantia book and starting to sculpt prayers and poems from those paragraphs so that they can be shared. So that's that. Thank you all for coming. And now we can open it up for conversation however we'd like, but that's the presentation as it is. I see Luis has a hand up. Oh, I should stop sharing.
Sorry for being so annoying with constantly speaking, but I just wanted to say on behalf of, for the time that I spent as ISB member, for which I am grateful to you, Chris, for the invitation, and the beautiful experiences and moments that I shared with a great board and a great team of people that also helped me achieve many different things. I just want to thank you and Alice and the boys as a family unit, for all the work that you've done over the past 8 years, for bringing together such a dynamic, diverse, because many people know this, but maybe might not know this, but it's a very great combination of nationalities, cultural backgrounds, male, female diversity, and so forth that you are handing over now to Enrique. And I think the progress on the great work that was done by Gaetan that you built on is something that will continue. And I just want to thank you for your leadership, for your good cheer, for empowering people, for allowing others to believe in themselves, and for paving the way and easing the way for so many of us to do great things individually as service people and as community. I think there's great projects going on right now, and a lot of the work that you leave behind will be the seeds that will continue to be sowed for many, many years. So thank you for all that to you and Alice and your family.
Thank you, Luis. It's very kind of you.
Luis, Alice loves it when Chris blushes. It's nice to see you blushing, Chris.
Yes, I try to explain to my family that there are entire rooms full of people who find me impressive, and they just laugh and laugh. So
I guess while I see Guard there, Guard once made a comment about regularly buying his wife flowers. And ever since then, Chris has been making up for the extra dishes washing that I do by keeping the table stocked with flowers.
Chris, you're much smarter than I thought you were. Very, very good. Lovely. Keep it up. 39 years I've been doing it. Keep doing it.
Trying my best. Pablo.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I would like to share a simple analogy about service. What happened when we have been studying for years and finally we get our degree? If a medical, then we will be eager to go and cure people, right? If an architect, then we will try to make nice designs and get them built. If a young learned how to fix a motor, will be anxious to see the client's happy face when finally he pick up the car and feel the satisfaction of a work well done, and so on. Therefore, it is natural that at the moment that we feel as sons or daughters of God, then our soul make us feel in our heart, the need to share that happiness and serve. It witness that we have become cosmic citizens and recognize each other that we are brothers and sisters trying to make and to have a better understanding of our great universal Father. And this knowledge will do, with that knowledge, we will do a best or a major effort to be like him, to do his will and to be perfect as he wants us to be. Finally, I want to thank you, Chris, for all the work of all these years, and congratulations for the nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You know, I should maybe add, I forgot to mention this earlier when I was talking about service and becoming a multilinguist. The association is trying a pilot program right now to use the Urantia book to help learn other languages. And so there's a group of people down in Latin America who are primarily Spanish speakers who are learning English through the study of the Urantia book and helping to share the studies, and they meet together and they study English and they talk about the Urantia teachings in English, and it's a wonderful program that I hope will be successful and then be able to be expanded into, say, English speakers learning Spanish and German speakers learning Portuguese and whatever else we can do to help with the multiplication of multilinguists. So the association is doing great work that will continue for many years to come, including under the leadership of the man with his hand up, Mr. Enrique.
Thanks, Chris. Well, this was really a very nice discussion and presentation you have done that make us to think about what service is, and certainly it will give us all an opportunity to thinking about that, see how we can serve our Father and our brother and sisters. Really, I have accepted that challenge of taking over after you, this big mission. The challenge of taking the position after you is just bigger because of the wonderful job Gaetan and then after you have done for the association. I built up a map of the presence of Urantia community around the world. And I was really surprised to see every corner we are reaching already and things that we have done. And perhaps nearly we can share this map and some other pictures with our brothers and sisters to see how the teachings are spreading out through the world. So I want to thank you and to thank all the team that built up this wonderful team that we have at the Urantia Association. And I'm sure we're going to continue to do a good job with all this team. And also, I'm sure we have the good support from not just from you, Gaetan, but also all the students and those wisdom people we have within the community to help us and to assist us on moving forward. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate that presentation I have done today. It is inspiring, and we certainly will keep moving on. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. And I can't wait. You're going to be great because, I mean, we're going to have this completely new perspective from the Urantia community coming out of Latin America. So many of our leaders right now and the people who are driven and doing the best work are coming out of Latin America. And so to have the president reflect that is going to give a completely new flavor to our entire global movement. And so it's going to be just different and better and more enriching for all of us. So also to have this rotation of leadership means that there are now just great leaders spread throughout the world who have had a few years of experience of doing leadership on this global scale service for the International Association. And so they just exist out there in pockets so that when something happens like a global pandemic, they're ready to take up the leadership in their communities and move us forward. And so great work has been done by so many people, and it's going to be great. Sorry, Alice, I have been talking when you want to talk. Always a mistake.
I just want to relay a message that someone sent me asking about how to register for the workshop that Chris and I will be giving. And so and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll want to watch for the announcement for the conference itself, which will be coming at some point between now and the middle of April. And then within that, at some point you'll start to see the actual workshop times and how to register within those emails. So look for emails about the conference itself.
Yes, coming very soon will be a grand email asking you to register for the conference. And then once you've registered, you will then be given the list of workshops, which will grow over time. Depending on how many people register, we'll have more workshops available. And so then you will register for your particular workshops at those times. Jeannie, I got that right, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Hey, Enrique, I want to warn you. 30 years ago, when my wife first read the book, I asked her, how long do you think it will take for us to get to light and life? She said, oh, about 50 years. So it could be within your frame of reference. So you've got a big load to carry there, buddy. Chris and our friend Gaetan have set the table for you, but you got to bring it home.
Okay, I think we have to read the book together again, always.
By the way, she has since revised her estimates.
All right, well, the other favorite saying I have is that, you can fool some of the people all the time and you fool all the people some of the time. Well, let's just focus on those. I think those are great messages to have. You can fool all of the people some of the time. The key is to know when to stop talking and when to walk away and to hand off leadership to another person. And if you can do that just right, then you'll have fooled everybody and you can be out of the room before they realize anything else. So I think that this is a good place to end this particular workshop. Thank you all for coming. And we'll be seeing you in Peru. We'll be seeing you at future of these things. I'll be going to conferences still. I'm not going anywhere. We're just going to be following Enrique's leadership for a few years. So thank you, everybody.
I would like to say something.
Yes, Jeannie.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. To work with you has been a privilege. I have learned a lot. And as I told you some time ago, to work as education committee chair has been an amazing experience. And you have been an inspiration for me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for the presentation and for your living example. You are an example of service for us and for our Father. Thank you. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.